I was still holding the glass plaque when they asked me to step into the small conference room. The applause was barely fading in the background, my name still lingering on a few lips. When I sat down across from Melissa in HR, she didn't smile. She didn't even look me in the eye, just slid a single sheet of paper across the table as if it were a memo about printer ink. Subject: Salary Adjustment Notice. Effective immediately. A reduction of $3,500 per month. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a clerical error. Maybe someone clicked the wrong box in the payroll software. I glanced up, waiting for the explanation, an apology, a correction, something. But Melissa just cleared her throat and said, flatly, "This is part of a broader restructuring, nothing personal." I stared down at the award still resting in my lap. Employee of the Year, engraved in gold cursive. My hands tightened around it, like it could somehow anchor me to reality. "I just got off the stage," I murmured. "This can't be right." She shifted in her seat. "The decision was made weeks ago. You should have received an internal memo." I scanned the document again, and that's when I saw it. Date issued 2 weeks ago. Date signed by CEO 14 days before the ceremony. They knew. They knew when they called my name in front of the entire company. They knew when they handed me flowers and applause. The whole performance, it wasn't recognition. It was camouflage. I couldn't feel my legs. I stood up slowly, still holding the plaque like it might shatter if I let go. Melissa was already reaching for her phone, moving on to the next item on her checklist. I stepped out into the hallway, blinking hard. Outside, the office was still buzzing with celebration. Balloons, cupcakes, people laughing near the break room. My photo was on the screen by reception, but in my head, all I could hear was a quiet question echoing. If this wasn't a reward, what exactly was it? The next morning, the office looked exactly the same, but something in the air had shifted, like walking into a room where someone had just finished a conversation about you and pretended they hadn't. I passed by the same people who'd stood applauding less than 24 hours ago. No one looked up. No one said congratulations. No one even nodded. The plaque on my desk felt radioactive. No one came near it. I sat down, opened my inbox, and stared. Not a single email. Not a single follow-up from leadership. Just the usual bulletins and system updates. It was like I had disappeared from the org chart overnight, but was still expected to sit quietly at my station and keep typing. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. The flowers, the standing ovation, the HR meeting, the salary cut, but the weight in my chest reminded me it was all real. Every inch of it. At noon, I went to the break room. 3 team leads were huddled by the coffee machine. One of them, a guy named Tom, who I used to brainstorm system architecture with, actually turned away when he saw me walking in. The others followed. No eye contact, no words. I poured myself a cup of stale coffee, trying to ignore the lump rising in my throat. "Hey," came a soft voice behind me. I turned to find Jenna, the intern from the data team, standing there, holding a packet of instant oatmeal and looking hesitant. "Do you have a second?" I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. She led me to the quiet end of the hallway, near the old server closet. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," she started, "but I saw something in the internal Slack that didn't feel right." She opened her laptop and clicked through a few folders before pulling up a screenshot. A message from one of the senior HR managers. It read, "Cut cost quietly. Spin PR publicly. Award optics soften blowback. Keep the narrative clean." I stared at the screen, the words pressing into my brain like cold metal. Award optics. I wasn't even a person in their eyes. I was a narrative tool, a polished trophy to distract people from the coming cuts. I exhaled, slow and tight. Where did you get this? Jenna looked down. It was sent to the Strategy Leads channel by mistake. I guess someone deleted it a minute later, but I took a screenshot. My fingers trembled, but I forced myself to close the laptop. Thank you, Jenna. She nodded. I'm sorry. You deserved better. I gave a faint smile. I thought so too. When I returned to my desk, the silence around me was louder than before, and for the first time in years, I questioned something I never had to before. Was I ever truly part of this place? Or just convenient decoration? By Thursday morning, I had stopped expecting things to make sense. I arrived at 8 a.m., coffee in hand, trying to move through the day like it was just another sprint cycle. But when I got to my desk, there was a new name on the calendar invites, Todd Ellison, labeled VP of Integration, suddenly appearing on everything related to Sync Bridge deployment. Meetings I used to lead now showed him as host. Threads I used to moderate now had him making key decisions. By 10:15 a.m., I was removed from a call I had personally scheduled 3 weeks prior. No warning, no explanation. Just gone. At 11:30, I finally met him in person. He showed up 10 minutes late to a systems planning meeting, wearing a light gray suit 2 sizes too tight, and the kind of smirk that screams, "I've read half a book about leadership." "Hi, folks," he said, clapping his hands once. "I'm Todd. You've probably seen my name pop up. I'll be taking point on final integration strategy for SyncBridge." People nodded politely. I kept my expression neutral, but my heart was hammering. I waited. He didn't acknowledge me at all. After the meeting, I caught him in the hallway. "Oh, I'm Harper," I said. "I built the SyncBridge framework. Happy to walk you through the more sensitive integration points." He raised an eyebrow, as if I'd just offered to explain how a light switch works. "Appreciate the offer," he replied. "But I've already reviewed the code base. I'm here to clean up your legacy code." I froze. "Legacy?" I asked. "You mean the code that's not even live yet?" He smiled thinly. "Exactly." That word, legacy, stuck like a splinter in my throat. It was the language of dismissal, of obsolescence. It meant, you are the past now, I am the future. I walked back to my desk, replaying the conversation like a glitching loop. I had written nearly every line of that system. It wasn't perfect, no system is, but I had tested it rigorously, built redundancy into every critical function. I knew it inside out. It was the best work I'd ever done. And now it was being handed over to someone who thought reducing system latency meant closing background tabs. That afternoon, 3 more meetings went by without my inclusion. When I asked Jenna what happened to the shared documents I created, she winced and said, "Todd moved everything to his private OneDrive. He says it's for streamlining." Streamlining. Another polite corporate knife. By the end of the day, my name had been stripped from the project's architecture board. No one said it out loud. But the message was deafening. You are no longer essential. I watched from my desk as Todd walked into yet another strategy meeting without me, holding a glossy pitch deck and that same tight-lipped grin. A year ago, no one in this building even knew what SyncBridge was. Now it was the future, their golden ticket, their billion-dollar brag, and somehow, I'd become invisible in the very thing I had built. I minimized my screen and leaned back, eyes drifting up toward the ceiling tiles. 2 years ago, this project didn't even have a name, just a sketch I drew on a whiteboard at 7:30 p.m. after everyone had gone home. The floor lit by the blue hum of server lights. The system didn't just appear, it was birthed through sleepless nights, backed up pizza orders, and weeks of silence so I could stay in flow state. I'd coded the backbone during flu season, pushing through a fever because no one else knew how the resource balancing function was structured. I still remember falling asleep on my keyboard at 4:05 in the morning, with a post-it stuck to my forehead that read, "Back up before deploy." when the team couldn't fix the memory leak that crashed every 80th transaction. It was me who traced it back to a mismatched timestamp buried inside a deprecated API module, when the predictive engine started overestimating demand by 43%. It was my late-night test set that uncovered the logic flaw. They didn't call it Harper's Code, but it was. And now, that name had been wiped from every document. "Hey!" Jenna whispered, pulling me from my thoughts. She approached my desk, laptop in hand, face tight with something between worry and guilt. "Can I show you something?" I nodded. She pulled up the new project overview slides, the ones Todd had distributed to the Syntrex liaison earlier that morning. It was shiny, animated, full of buzzwords like seamless integration and next-gen synergy. I flipped through them slowly, scanning for something familiar, a diagram, a name. There wasn't one. Not a single mention of me. Not in the build timeline. Not in the technical leadership page. Not in the acknowledgements. Nothing. "It's like they rewrote history," Jenna said softly. I swallowed hard, the silence pressing against my chest like a steel beam. "It's not your fault," I whispered. She hesitated, then added, "Todd told the team you were stepping back voluntarily." I laughed, but it came out hollow. Voluntarily, right. That word, like so many lately, was being twisted into something unrecognizable, like me. As Jenna walked away, I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear it all down. But instead, I saved the slides to a private folder and renamed the file proof-of-erasure.pdf. After seeing my name vanish from every document, something inside me clicked. Not rage, not panic, just clarity. I didn't storm into anyone's office. I didn't email legal. I didn't even tell Jenna, because I didn't need to. They thought they'd taken everything. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that 2 years ago, I had quietly built a failsafe into SyncBridge's architecture. I called it Obsidian, not a weapon, not sabotage, just a lock. A deep, invisible lock embedded in the lowest layer of the system, beneath the main API, under the integration protocols. It didn't break anything. It didn't alert anyone. It just waited. Obsidian was my insurance policy, because I knew something most developers never say out loud. The moment your code becomes valuable, it stops being yours. And the moment you become invisible, no one protects your work but you. Obsidian had one function. If no authentication token from the original system architect was registered within 36 hours of a new deployment, it triggered a soft shutdown. No files deleted, no data lost. But every endpoint would simply refuse to respond. It wasn't even that complex. It relied on biometric confirmation linked to a developer key, my developer key. I designed it so that only I could unlock the full system after final deployment. Not out of paranoia, out of pattern recognition. I had seen too many friends sidelined after success, their ideas handed off, their names erased like chalk from a board. The company had never audited the deepest parts of the code. They were too busy running demos, pitching investors, chasing headlines. No one thought to ask if the engine needed more than just a launch command. But I knew. I always knew. I sat at my desk that afternoon, watching Todd deliver a fake smile to the Syntrex liaison over a Teams call. He was saying things like, bulletproof backend, and no single point of failure, completely unaware that the system depended on a single token, one he didn't have. I opened my terminal window, typed in a few diagnostic lines, and confirmed it. Obsidian was dormant, watching, waiting. If they tried to push the final build without me, 36 hours later, it would all stop. Not forever. Just long enough for them to understand that architecture is more than buzzwords and job titles. It's about trust. And they broke mine. I closed the window, stood up, straightened my blazer. Let them keep erasing my name from the documents. They'd feel it soon enough. Not my voice, but my absence. By the end of the week, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just hollow. The kind of hollow that doesn't come from one sharp wound, but from dozens of tiny cuts you barely notice, until you look down and realize you're bleeding. The Sync Bridge channel was flooded with updates I wasn't tagged in. Meetings rolled on without me. Documents were rewritten. Diagrams I created were rebranded and reshaped. And no one thought to loop me in. I stopped staying late. I stopped checking in with the engineers I mentored. I even stopped opening the project dashboard. There was no point. At 9:15 a.m. on Friday, I opened a blank Word doc and typed the words, "To whom it may concern, please accept this letter as formal notice of resignation." The cursor blinked at me. Rhythmically, I wrote the whole thing in 12 minutes. Short, professional, detached, just like they had been with me. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. Just numb. Like something inside me had shut off to protect what was left. Then, at 10:30 a.m., I passed by the war room, now labeled Sync Bridge Strategy HQ. The door was half open, and inside, Todd was standing at the whiteboard, waving a marker like it was a baton. Jenna was seated at the table, notebook in hand, eyes down. "I need real answers," Todd snapped. "Not these soft maybes. If you don't know, just say you don't know. Don't waste my time with guesses." "I was just trying to clarify the logic behind the—" "Then clarify faster, or stop talking," he barked. "Next time, don't ask dumb questions." The room fell silent. No one spoke up. No one defended her. I watched Jenna's face crumple just slightly, barely enough for most people to notice. But I noticed. The same way I noticed she always double-checked her math, stayed late to learn the code base, came in early to prep her questions. And in that moment, I saw myself, 5 years ago, on the receiving end of someone else's need to feel superior. I stepped away from the door, walked back to my desk, and stared at the resignation letter sitting open on my screen. The silence around me felt heavier than ever. But this time, it didn't crush me, it clarified me. I reached for the mouse, hit Save As, and renamed the file. Not yet. Then I minimized the window, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to no one. Not while he's still in that room. Because if I left now, Jenna would be next, and no one would be left to remind them that quiet doesn't mean powerless. By 8 a.m. Monday morning, the office was electric with anticipation. Big monitors were being rolled into conference rooms. Catering trays arrived from a fancy downtown bakery. Even the C-suite showed up before 10, something that hadn't happened in months. It was Sync Bridge Demo Day, the final integration showcase, they called it. Live-streamed to Syntrex's executive team, global stakeholders, and internal teams across 4 continents, a make-or-break presentation. One, Todd insisted, would cement our position as leaders in next-gen logistics intelligence. I wasn't invited. No email, no calendar hold, not even a CC. Instead, I watched from my desk, tucked in the back corner of the floor, pretending to be buried in bug reports while the office buzzed with speeches and lanyards. The irony was almost poetic. I'd spent over 3,000 hours building the very system they were now unveiling. Without me, at 9:52 a.m., I opened my private terminal window, typed a few quiet commands, and checked the deployment status. The build had gone live early that morning. No biometric key had been registered. No override triggered. Obsidian was armed, and Todd had no idea. My email pinged. A private message from Elias, a back-end engineer who used to sit beside me before he got moved to another floor under Todd's new org map. Elias. "They're skipping integrity checks. Pushed live anyway. Said testing was already done weeks ago." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back one line. Got it. That was all. No warnings, no red flags. If they wanted to run $1 billion system without a final verification key, that was their choice. I sipped my coffee, lukewarm now, and leaned back as the office lights dimmed slightly. On the big monitor outside the glass meeting room, Todd's face appeared, backlit and beaming. Today marks a turning point, he said, gesturing confidently. With SyncBridge, we eliminate latency, human error, and inefficiency. This isn't just software, it's infrastructure. I almost laughed, not because he was wrong, but because he had no idea how fragile that infrastructure actually was. He thought code was just commands and compilers. He forgot about control. Obsidian didn't care about ego. It didn't respond to hierarchy or hype. It simply waited for one condition to be met. And when it wasn't, it did what it was designed to do. I closed the terminal window. The timer had already started, in 36 hours. They'd learned the hard way that what they dismissed as legacy wasn't outdated. It was untouchable, and I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd already spoken, through code they chose to ignore. At 9:30 a.m. sharp, 36 hours after the final build went live, the lights dimmed across the entire Virexa main conference floor. A massive screen at the front lit up with the Syntrex logo, followed by a polished countdown timer. On the dot. The broadcast launched across multiple global feeds, Virexa's first fully virtual deal showcase. Over $1 billion on the table, hundreds of stakeholders watching, dozens of reputations riding on it, and I just sat at my desk, calm as a still lake, across the room. Todd adjusted his tie for the fourth time. He stood center stage beside a touchscreen panel, nodding confidently as he began the walkthrough. Today, he boomed, we bring together speed, scale, and synchronization. SyncBridge will change how logistics operates worldwide. A scripted pause. Then, he tapped the screen to launch the predictive demo. The system loaded. A spinning wheel appeared, then stayed. Someone in the audience chuckled nervously. Todd tapped again. Behind him, the predictive dashboard froze entirely, the forecast window still blinking loading parameters. He tried a manual override. The system ignored him. From the tech table, I saw Elias lean forward, whispering to a junior dev. Panic flickered across their faces. You could feel the air shift, first curiosity, then confusion, then dread. Todd coughed and filled time with buzzwords. But the system didn't budge. In New York, the Syntrex team blinked through a satellite feed, glancing sideways at one another. One of them leaned off camera and said something, probably to legal. I sipped my tea. Exactly 36 hours. Obsidian had kept its promise. Across the room, Jenna looked at me from her seat near the second monitor. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted. She stood, quietly walked over, and leaned down next to me. Did you... she whispered, her voice shaking. Did you do something? I didn't look up right away. I watched Todd fumble through a backup presentation, watched the CTO pull him aside mid-broadcast, his mic still hot. Then I turned to Jenna and smiled. I didn't break it, I said softly. I just didn't save it. Her eyes widened. She blinked once. It's because they cut you out. I shrugged. It's because they didn't ask the right person to finish what they started. Behind us, the live stream was cut abruptly. Screens went black. There were murmurs, first quiet, then building. Phones lit up. Executives whispered into earpieces. The silence of confusion had officially turned into the chaos of damage control. And through it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Weightless. For the first time since that plaque landed in my lap. I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't erased. I was the ghost in the machine. The one they tried to forget. but couldn't. The fallout came faster than I expected. By 11:15 a.m., the live stream had been pulled from every platform. The Virexa floor was a minefield of red-faced managers and frantic interns. Todd had vanished from the main conference area, along with two of his hand-picked advisors. Elias told me later that their laptops were confiscated before lunch, but I wasn't watching them. I was in the empty break room, pouring the last of the coffee into a paper cup. When my phone rang, the number was unfamiliar, but the voice wasn't. "Harper, this is Vanessa Cole, CTO of Syntrex." I froze, straightened. "Yes, of course." "I'll be brief," she said. "Your name was flagged during our due diligence. We've known since Phase 2 who built Sync Bridge's architecture. And after what happened this morning, we're convinced you're the only reason it worked as well as it did, for as long as it did." She didn't ask what went wrong. She already knew. "I want to make you an offer," she continued. "Direct lead on our internal systems overhaul. We're not going through Virexa. We're going through you." There was a pause. "I know this isn't a small decision, but your silence today spoke louder than any presentation I've sat through in 20 years. I smiled for the first time in days. Genuinely. "I appreciate that, Ms. Cole, truly." "Think it over," she said. "But just so you know, we've already removed Virexa from our vendor shortlist." Click. I stared at the phone, heart pounding, not with nerves, but with something I hadn't felt in weeks: freedom, recognition. A moment later, Jenna approached, clutching a folder and her badge. She looked tired, but resolved. "I gave notice," she said. 2 weeks. I raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "After what you did?" she said with a grin. "I'm so sure." I didn't ask what she'd do next. I didn't need to. She was coming with me. That much was clear. As we walked back toward our desks, I noticed the message notification flashing on my monitor. An email from Reed Langford, CEO of Virexa. Subject: urgent. We need to talk. I opened it. "Harper, what happened this morning was unfortunate, and I believe we may have misunderstood your intentions and value to the organization. I'd like to personally invite you to rejoin the transition team and assist with immediate damage control. Your expertise would be invaluable in preserving the Syntrex opportunity. Name your terms. We're listening now." I read it twice. Then I closed the tab. No reply, no explanation, no vengeance, just silence. And this time, it was mine to own. The conference center buzzed with conversation: tech leads, ethics panels, keynote speakers from every corner of the industry. It had been 6 months since I walked out of Virexa without a word. But in this room, silence carried more weight than noise. My name was printed in bold on the event program. Harper Lynn, keynote speaker topic: Ethical Ownership in Systems Architecture. I'd practiced my talk a dozen times, but when I stepped on stage at 9:00 a.m., I didn't need a script. My story was already written into the code. I talked about responsibility, about being erased from what you built, about the difference between access and ownership, and the quiet, personal lines we draw to protect the integrity of what we create, especially when no one else will. The crowd was still when I finished. Some clapped. A few stood. But I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing something else. And I had finally caught it. As I stepped off stage, I caught a glimpse of him, Todd, sitting alone in the third row, no badge around his neck, no company logo on his laptop, just a faded gray hoodie and the kind of stare that says, "I didn't expect to see you here." His eyes met mine, just for a second. I didn't flinch, I didn't smile, I didn't stop. Neither did he. He looked smaller, not physically, but smaller in presence, in weight. The kind of man who'd once held the center of a billion-dollar rollout, and now couldn't even find a seat near the front. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. I kept walking. And there, just past the curtain, was Jenna, holding 2 coffees, still with that spark behind her eyes. "You crushed it," she said, handing me one. "Room was dead silent for 20 minutes after you finished. Not even phones out." I smiled, taking the cup. "Thanks for being here." She looked around the venue, then back at me. "You built something no one else could," she said softly, "including me." The words hit deeper than I expected, not just because they were kind, but because they were true. I didn't just build a system, I built a standard. And the people who tried to erase it? They were the ones now invisible. Justice doesn't always come from screaming. Sometimes it comes from knowing where the final key is and never giving it to those who don't deserve it. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. If you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated, leave a comment and share your story. And if you believe quiet strength still matters in this noisy world, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. For more true-to-life stories about power, integrity, and quiet revenge, subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the best victories are the ones nobody sees coming.